All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to be in the 147-pound division, where Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford are in a negotiation. According to Terence Crawford, they're in a negotiation, and Terence Crawford has some things to say about the fight at 154 and how we'll find out. He says something to the effect of, we'll find out if we're going to have the fight and we'll see how the negotiations go. In doing so, he says some things about Errol Spence that make me believe that Errol Spence Jr. knows exactly what he's doing, and his team knows exactly what he's doing with Terence Crawford. And that Terence Crawford very, very, very well may wind up in a situation where people, well, how can I say this? Where some of his chickens come home to roost. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to be in the 147-pound division, where Terence Crawford made some new statements about what's going on with the Errol Spence Jr. fight. And it, along with some things that were said by Leonard Ellerbe, who is the CEO of Mayweather Promotions, has led me to believe that, or to suspect, not believe, because I don't know for sure, suspect that Terence Crawford could be doing to himself what Errol Spence Jr. did to himself in the first negotiation with Terence Crawford. And that I'm not 100% sure if Terence Crawford really knows what's in his contract. But before I get into that, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, please accept my invitation to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. And if you are a long-time subscriber and supporter of the channel, thank you so much for continuing to do it. And thank you to everybody that supports and the super thanks. I'm going to try to cut into this subject a little fast this video. Let me say a couple things first before I go. If you are handed an x-ray, I'd say you go to the dentist and the dentist does an x-ray of your mouth, x-rays your mouth, all your teeth. And then as you sit in the dentist chair, they put up the x-ray and they point at it. Now, without that doctor, that dentist explaining to you what you see in that x-ray, all you're really going to do is see all you're going to see is teeth, right? Same way if a radiologist put up an MRI of your brain. You're going to say, okay, I can see my brain, but I don't know what you're talking about. And they say, hey, do you see this little shadowy area right here? Yeah, I guess. Well, let me tell you what that is, right? You see this little thing right here? Let me tell you what that is. But without that doctor, you'd be lost. Okay? So that is telling you, when I'm going to get into what I'm discussing, as somebody that has a legal background, somebody has a legal education, somebody that writes contracts, drafts contracts, very well experienced and educated on contract law, right? Not just the execution of an in particular contract, but contract law. Let me tell you, I would look at people all the time. Me and someone else can read the same agreement, the same clause of an agreement, and they will not have they will be so far off as to the meaning of that particular term that, it's just, that's why you have to hire somebody to read it for you. That's why you got to hire somebody to write it for you. And a lot of times you have to hire somebody to negotiate it for you, because they can be very, very technical documents. And even if you think something is obvious on its face, it may not be. So again, with the analogy of the dentist being at the dentist's office, looking at x-rays of your teeth, you could probably not find where the cavities are. You probably couldn't find or even name what the teeth are. right? Is that the canine? Is that the bicuspid? You're not going to be able to do it. A lot of people are not going to be able to do it. So let me go on with this statement. So Terence Crawford comes out and says, as far as whether the rematch is going to be at 154 pounds or not, right? 154 pounds or not. He says something that I know, without even looking at the x-rays, is not true. I know it's not true. What does he say? He says the contract states that in order for the fight to be at 154, that one party, either he or I, have to notify the other that he can no longer make 147 pounds. So since he has not notified me, the fight has to take place at 147. I think that is a very fair representation of what he said. The problem here is, though, that his interpretation of his own words is wrong, just with that being there alone. Number one, let me explain why. And there's two things. Just because he needs to notify you in writing does not mean that the fight cannot still be at 154 without notifying you in writing before the actual fight contract is published. Because he could literally send you a contract, an offer rather. He could send you an offer and say, we offer at this rate at the weight of 154 pounds, and that would satisfy that clause right there. Because they notified you in writing. Now, why do I know that would work? Or why do I suspect, rather, that would work? I suspect that would work because he's already been notified of the rematch clause. Since he was already notified of the rematch clause, and the notification for the rematch clause did not include the section about the being notified in writing of the 154 pound, the necessity of a 154 pound fight, then you know it's not part of that clause. That's just process of elimination. So if there was a deadline to activate the rematch clause, and there was not a necessity to say 154 attached to the activation of the rematch clause, he can therefore only reasonably, this is very reasonable, notify him in writing at any time. Now, watch something else. Terence Crawford, if you recall, has a manager whose name is Brian McIntyre. Brian McIntyre stated before the Conor Benn fight, the Chris Eubank fight, when Chris Eubank beat Liam Smith, he was asked at a press conference, right, which is the same pretty much in an interview, just like Terence Crawford was asked in an interview, do you know about the Errol Spence Terence Crawford rematch? Do you recall what Brian McIntyre's response was? His response was, they have not notified us or activated the rematch clause yet. 24 hours later, less than 48 hours later, Brian McIntyre was interviewed again and he said, oh, I'm sorry, correction, we were notified. Okay, we were notified of it. So since they were notified of it and Brian McIntyre thought that they were not notified of it, that leaves the possibility that Terence Crawford could be notified of it and not know that he was notified of it. Now, why is this? Because of a principle in contract and in business called agency, where somebody that you have designated as your representative or somebody that a person who is doing business with you reasonably believed to be your representative and therefore authorized to legally bind you to an agreement, when they have been notified or they have agreed to something, you have been agreed to. You have agreed to it. You have been notified of it. Now, also, there's talk about it has to be in writing. Well, this is an area where you don't know if you do not know specifically all the terms of the agreement, because you can be notified in writing, could be a text if you do not specify it. It could be an email if you do not specify otherwise. It can be, you can write it on a napkin and hand it to him, throw across the table if you don't specify. So there's questions about whether or not Terence Crawford knows how exactly he himself, when he has an agent representing him, knows whether or not he has actually been notified or not. Just because you don't know about it and somebody hasn't told you that does not mean that you, for legal purposes, has not been notified. That's how that works. So why do I say that Errol Spence Jr., it seems as if they are doing similar, they're doing something similar than Terence that Terence did to Errol. Errol's team, one of the reports that had come out was that, number one, there was a debate about whether or not the contract said that the notification must take place within 30 days or 30 business days. And that Errol Spence's team was going to wait as long as they needed to wait in order to do it. They were going to make their decision at the last minute. And that's what he said. So what happens? People start around 30 days after, which was, if I recall correctly, August 30th. People start talking about whether or not the rematch clause has been exercised and whether the time has expired. Well, guess what? The time didn't expire, even though one party thought it did. And the other party clearly thought it didn't. So what do we know? Well, we know that Terence Crawford is still in negotiations, and he's still in negotiations for the rematch. So we know whatever that controversy was settled with the person that thought it was the longer amount of time, which was clearly Errol Spence Jr. So what would differentiate that situation? Or what's the likelihood that he's not doing the same thing with any discussion about what weight class it'll be in? Now, let me tell you why I think he would be doing that and why that would make sense for him to do that. It would make sense for him to do that if he doesn't want to haggle with Terence Crawford for any extended period of time. So say that there is no necessity or time frame with which he has to say to Terence Crawford in writing 154 pounds. And let's assume that he did not get notified as of yet. I know a lot of you people don't follow, but assumption, okay, stick with me. Why would he not have already done it? Because he doesn't want to give Terence, he could not want to give Terence Crawford a lot of time to keep going back and forth about this, that, and the other thing, trying to get all kind of other stuff out of him. Because if he is not formally if he's not formally made the offer to him, that could very well mean that he's saying, look, I don't think Terence Crawford has any other options really other than to fight me. And here's 150, and I'm going to tell him 154 pounds when we actually send the contract over, the actual contract over. And I'm not telling him or tipping my hand or doing anything about whether I'm taking it or not taking it anytime before that. Why? Because it's smart. Because Terence Crawford had kept him in a negotiation for a year and a half last time. And I think that this is buoyed by the fact that Terence Crawford in the interview says, hey, we'll see how this negotiation goes. And Errol may be saying, no, brother, this is not going to be a negotiation. This is going to be me saying it's at 154. Now, one last thing about this, and I know this is a bit of a technical conversation, but it is what it is. You know, it's my channel. I want to talk about things I want to talk about. I find these things interesting. Let's assume also that clause is exactly what Terence Crawford says and nothing more. Let me repeat what he said it was. Errol Spence, one party, either he or Errol, have to notify the other that they are unable to make 154 pounds or 147 pounds. If that is it, say that is it, that is the only thing that is written down there. Do you know what that means? That means that Terence Crawford doesn't have a choice. And why would that be? Because notification and approval are two different things, which is something that I tried to tell a lot of people when Terence Crawford was saying that he needs visibility or he needs transparency into the contract, into the expenses for the first fight. And what I would continually say is, look, man, transparency is not an issue. It's the approval part that's the issue. Yes, you can see them. Whether or not you can say yes or no is a different issue. So if that clause only says what Terence Crawford says it does, then there's no reason for Errol to tell him 154 anytime before they send him the contract. And if he doesn't sign it at 154, he's stuck. Okay, so if we're all going to listen and just talk about this contract and go back and forth based off what specific people say, think about that for a second. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.